So Tesla.
So that's one big, we think that's going to be the biggest in the short term in terms of revenue generation, the biggest application of AI. We think the most profound application of AI is going to be in healthcare. Because of AI, and this is already beginning to happen, we are able to diagnose cancer with a blood test in stage 1. Think about that. If you discover cancer in stage 1, you can save most people,
Crazy.
right? And maybe even before stage 1. Why? This is the convergence of sequencing technologies. So DNA, RNA, protein sequencing technologies. And then the third technology that is breakthrough and already making a difference is CRISPR gene editing. The convergence of those 3 technologies is beginning to cure disease. So a company called CRISPR Therapeutics, which is one of the largest in our ARKG fund and in the top 10 in our ARKK fund, has developed a therapy to cure sickle cell disease and beta thalassemia. Both of those are blood-related diseases, with one treatment. Think about that. Now, the preconditioning for that is gruesome. It involves, it's almost like chemotherapy, which is going to change. But nonetheless, there's huge demand for it because, these people go to the emergency room 10 to 20 times per year for blood transfusions to save their lives. Mm-hmm. Of course, they're going to go through a tough regimen. They want to live a more normal life. So it's already generating revenue. Both of those are already generating revenue for CRISPR Therapeutics and a company called Vertex.
So there's 3 or 4 different companies you've mentioned here. Tesla, the other one was Archer.
Archer is the eVTOL company, yes.
Which is your flying cars, basically your drone cars.
Yes.
And CRISPR and Tesla. So if I start with Tesla, you were bullish on Tesla. You were making big predictions about Tesla before pretty much anyone else out there. I think in 2015. Mm-hmm. And at the time, in 2015, you said that you believed the stock would get above 4,000, roughly?
Right, on the old stock.
Yeah, before the stock split.
Yes.
And you were right by some significant margin. I think you predicted it would be 4,000 before the stock splits. And I think at its peak, that equates to about 18,000, maybe 12,000 at its peak.
Yes, well,
in that region.
We were right about 2 early years, or Tesla got to where we believed it would go 2 years before most expected. In 2018 and 19, many people, as Elon was discussing and describing production hell for the Model 3, many people thought the company would go bankrupt. And yet we knew that if Elon Musk could create a reusable rocket that could land on a barge in the water, he would be able to figure out how to produce at scale the Model 3. That was, to us, a simple conclusion. Now, as in hindsight, as we're learning from Tesla, production hell, and they themselves were worried. That's why Elon slept on the floor in the production factory and just became maniacally involved, which is how he works. So yes, and now our prediction, the stock is, I'm not going to be exactly right on this, $270, $280. Our prediction in 5 years is $2,600. And 90% of that valuation comes not from the electric vehicle, but from this robotaxi platform. Because the electric car, if you think about it, is a one-shot sale. Sell and hope they come back when they're replacing their car.
This essentially means that we'll be driving cars that we can click a button and then it becomes an autonomous taxi. So I go on holiday, I have my Tesla car at my house. When I go on holiday, the car turns into a taxi and starts chauffeuring people around. It makes me money. But also from the consumer's perspective that are trying to hail a taxi, at any point I can go on my Tesla app, press a button, a autonomous car comes to me with no one driving it, and it takes me to my destination with no driver at all.
Right.
And then the recurring revenue model, I believe, is you subscribe
It probably could.
to the network.
Could be you could subscribe to the network, or they could, maybe it could be either or subscription or a la carte if you don't think you're going to use it that much. So now, when I'm here in the UK and Europe, many people do not believe what you just said. And they don't because your regulators have not allowed FSD here. I think they might, somewhere in Europe, I think they're beginning to consider it. Maybe even in the UK here, they are considering it. In St. Petersburg, Florida, where we're based, I can go from my house to anywhere, and flawlessly, the car will take me there. Now, we still have to sit in the driver's seat for now, but in June or soon thereafter, when they turn the system on, if regulators permit, right now we're state by state, I think that's going to change so that we'll have federal regulation so that this can happen a lot faster. One other thing about Tesla, though, in that $2,600 number, we do not include much for humanoid robots. Now, this is happening faster than we thought. And the reason it's happening faster is humanoid robots, they are the convergence of the same three technologies or innovation platforms as robotaxis. Robots, robotics, so actuators and so forth, getting them to work. Energy storage, battery operated, and AI. So Tesla's way ahead of the game on humanoid robots, and yet we have very little. Now, Elon thinks that the humanoid robot business is going to dwarf the robotaxi business. And we think he's right, but longer term. So as I mentioned, we expect all in around the world, including China, not just Tesla, but the entire ecosystem, an $8 to $10 trillion market in the next 5 to 10 years. For humanoid robots, we expect a $26 trillion revenue market. Now, that's going to be a little further along. Robotaxis will happen faster, but it may not be as distant as we were once thinking.
For anyone that doesn't know, humanoid robots are basically robots that we'll have in our home and at work. So there was a video that I think Elon retweeted the other day showing one of the humanoid robots dancing.
Dancing, yes.
Was that real? I was looking at that video thinking, surely that's not real. But he confirmed, I believe, that it was real.
Yes. Now, when we went to the CyberCab event, there were some humanoid robots dancing there, but they were tethered and they were remotely controlled.
Yeah.
Now, CyberCab, I think, was...
about a year ago.
Yes, maybe. So since then, they've been able to untether them. And I do believe that that dancing robot was not tethered and not remotely controlled.
It was quite shocking to see a robot doing that, because if a robot can have that dexterity and mobility, and then you overlay that with the AI technologies that are accelerating rapidly, it begs the question. And the question is quite clear, which is, what about humans?
Yes. And just to put a finer, note on this, Elon will not be satisfied until these robots can thread a needle. So that's where we're going.
What does that mean for humans?
So, the history of technology is that it has been a net job creator throughout history.